senior Iranian official invoked powerful religious imagery to threaten US President Donald Trump, framing the confrontation as a battle between a tyrant and divine justice. Iran's Expediency Council chief Sadegh Amoli Larijani likened Donald Trump to the ancient Pharaoh, portraying him as a modern tyrant standing arrogantly against gods, while just as Iran and the US prepare for sensitive talks in Oman. Larijani warned that if Trump continues his current path of threats and pressure on Iran, he will ultimately face ruin and humiliation, just as the Egyptian pharaoh in scripture was destroyed at the height of his power for defying divine authority. In biblical tradition, the pharaohs of Egypt are condemned for enslaving the Israelites and hardening their hearts against God's commands. So Larijani's analogy suggests Trump is oppressing people and inviting a similarly catastrophic moral and political downfall. Iran International highlighted Larijani's remarks on February 5, just one day before US-Iran negotiations in Oman, underscoring how Tehran is using fiery religious rhetoric even as it steps into high-stakes diplomatic talks with Washington. Head of Iran's Expediency Council, Sadegh Amoli Larijani, said, "Trump is like the tyrant pharaoh from history, and at the very moment he claimed to be God, he was brought down." His remarks landed in an atmosphere of spiraling tension, as President Donald Trump once more brandished the possibility of using US military force against Iran, warning Tehran's leaders that they should be very worried about American firepower massed in the region. On the same day, a senior advisor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei declared that Iran was fully prepared to confront any foreign threat, insisting the country's armed forces and regional networks could swiftly respond to pressure from Washington or its allies. Ali Akbar Velayati, Khamenei's veteran foreign policy aide, sent a message to Hezbollah's leadership vowing that Iran would stand by the resistance front and oppose the United States and Israel without hesitation, framing Tehran as a steadfast partner in any confrontation. Velayati stressed that Iran did not seek to start a war, but he underlined that any external aggression would be met with a firm and wide-ranging response, signaling that Tehran was trying to project deterrence while still leaving the door open to diplomacy. He described Iran as the central pillar or backbone of the regional resistance camp, emphasizing that Tehran bankrolls, arms, and politically shields groups like Hezbollah as they confront Israel and resist Western influence across the Middle East. Taken together, the fiery religious warnings from Sadegh Amoli Larijani and the defiant strategic message from Ali Akbar Velayati signaled that Iran intends to answer US pressure not with concessions, but with hardline defiance and vows of enduring resistance on every front. The warnings landed just days before high-stakes US-Iran nuclear talks in Muscat, where both sides are scrambling to prevent a wider war even as they trade threats and military signals across the region. Iran's foreign minister confirmed that direct nuclear negotiations with the United States would go ahead on February 6, framing the talks as a rare and critical chance to address the nuclear standoff face-to-face rather than through intermediaries. Abbas Araghchi announced that the Muscat meeting was set for 10 a.m. local time and publicly thanked Oman for quietly mediating and organizing the session, highlighting the Sultanate's long-standing role as a discreet bridge between Tehran and Washington. President Masoud Pezeshkian said he had instructed his minister to pursue fair negotiations, signaling that Iran wants sanctions relief and security guarantees without accepting what it sees as humiliating or one-sided concessions at the table. Washington eventually confirmed it would attend the Oman talks after days of wrangling over where to meet and who else could sit in, with US officials agreeing to Muscat once Iran and regional states pushed to salvage the diplomatic track. In the run-up to the meeting, Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt quietly circulated a compromise plan that would cap Iran's uranium enrichment levels and introduce restraints on parts of its missile program, hoping to bridge the gap between maximal US demands and Iranian red lines. That emerging framework also sought to curb Iran's weapons transfers and logistical support to allied militias and movements across the region, aiming to fold Tehran's regional footprint into a broader package rather than treat it separately from the nuclear file. The talks were revived even as the Middle East braced for potential US strikes, with tensions soaring after Iran's security forces violently suppressed protests at home, prompting hawks in Washington to argue that diplomacy should be backed by credible military options. Donald Trump ordered what he called a massive armada towards Iran and warned that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei should be very worried, using dramatic language to underline that US warships and aircraft are positioned to hit back if Iran escalates. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio pushed for the Muscat agenda to include Iran's ballistic missiles, its network of proxy groups, and its record of human rights abuses, insisting that a narrow nuclear-only deal would leave the core security problems unresolved. Rubio also argued that Iran's clerical leadership no longer reflects the aspirations of its own people, pointing to waves of protests and economic hardship as evidence that many Iranians want more freedom and opportunity than the current system allows. The previous round of Oman diplomacy collapsed after Israeli and US forces bombed suspected Iranian nuclear facilities in June 2025, shattering what little trust existed and making this new Muscat summit feel like a fragile second chance rather than a routine negotiation.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that Rubio will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry guards.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.